Gary, wrapping up for today, we're talking Target or Target, as some like to call it, ticker TGT. They beat revenue estimates, but the story somehow lower prices despite gross margin gains, and future growth guidance is quietly lowered. Gary, thing number five, Target results. You're saying misinterpreted.
Yeah. So, Rob, I know we always have like the takeaway question. I'm just going to cut right through and get to the end on this. One of the things that is endlessly entertaining doing what I do is seeing the bad takes in the media. Um, Often these stories get sent around that allow people to understand what happened, except they're written often by people who have no idea what happened. And so the story in the media last week was Target beat their revenue estimates by lowering prices. And, somebody said, hey, they lowered prices on 5,000 items and, they got more sales as a result. And that would make sense, except here's the problem with that analysis, rather. Target's gross margins went up. Their prices weren't down overall. Their
Hmm.
average price was up. They're making more money on slightly more sales, which is not a bad thing for Target, but it means the analysis is wrong. They didn't lower prices. Yeah, they lowered prices on some items, but overall,
Right.
their gross margins were up. The other thing is, people were celebrating this big win, except somehow everybody forgot that a year ago, Target got themselves mired in a really contentious social issue. It's one we're not going to discuss here. But they were subjected to a boycott for people who were angry about the way Target handled this stuff. And so, that made the comparison for this year look easier. Just to give you a sense of how not great Target's results were, second quarter revenue this year was below the 2022 level. So you go back 2 years, their revenue is down. So this whole, they cut prices and increased their sales. No. Overall, they raised prices and their sales are down from where they were 2 years ago. They had an easy comparison from last year. Finally, the last point I'd make on this is Target's official guidance had been 0 to 2%. That's for revenue increase for the year. And, I took a look. The press release said, but now we're guiding people to the lower half of that range. So it's a really tricky way of doing things, right? So what does that mean? That means they took their guidance from a range of 0 to 2% growth to 0 to 1% growth. They cut their guidance in half. But because they kept the guidance the same and said, well, we're at the lower end of the range, instead of just lowering the range, people are like, oh, great, everything's fine. I assure you, when a company cuts their growth guidance in half, everything is not fine. It's also worth pointing out that 0 to 1% revenue growth that they're targeting, that is below the current inflation rate of 2.9%. I don't believe that 2.9% is correct. But the point is, Target is actually selling fewer goods for higher prices. Now, you can think that's a good thing. You can think that's a bad thing. My point is the media got this wrong. The headlines were wrong. The analysis was wrong. And this is how you take this stuff apart. And people often ask me, Rob, they often ask, how do you find your next idea? Like, how do you know what to look for? And my answer is I look for situations where the dominant narrative in a stock is incorrect. Now, I'm not invested in Target. I don't have a position. I'm not really interested in the company. I think they've got problems and I just, that's not the sandbox I want to play in. But the point of all this is these are the kinds of things I look for when everybody is convinced that something's true and they're all misinterpreting it and where the dominant narrative and the headlines are all wrong. These are situations, not Target specifically, but these are the kinds of things that I look at to find my next idea, to find ways of making money.
Yeah, I think you covered most of it there, Gary, but just again, another example of that bifurcation in the economy, talking about inflation boosting that dollar-denominated earnings. Gary, that wraps up this week's five things. Any closing thoughts from you on any of the points or any other takeaways?
Well, as a couple things. One, super excited about this new idea. DKI subscribers are already profitable in the name, but like I said, if you're interested, you didn't miss it. I think there's going to be more to come in that. Second, round of applause again for interns Andrew and Alex. They did the heavy lifting on this. What you're seeing here is it represents a huge amount of time and effort from them. It's a lot of work and creativity and thinking and organization from them. Um, you know, Rob, we get a lot of talk these days about, how young people in this generation, they're lazy, they're dumb, they're entitled, they don't know what's going on. I hear that all the time. But I work with these guys on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and the level of intellect and understanding and effort and work ethic I see from them, I think is just first rate. Um, we've got some good ones around here. Finally, for the people watching this again, we've added a lot of subscribers the last few weeks. Views are up, watch time is up. Your time is valuable. Thank you for spending it with us. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. And then finally, in recognition of it's going to be a light news week because of the holiday, a lot of people are already taking off for vacation. We are not going to produce a version of the five things for next week. There's just not that much going on. Obviously, for those of you who are curious, the big events for this week, NVIDIA earnings on Wednesday, that's going to move the market. But, by the time we're talking about it next Monday, that'll be stale. The PCE, Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, that's going to be reported, I think, on Friday. It is an important inflation index. It is the preferred inflation index of the Federal Reserve. But that said, unless that number is way out of expectations, and I don't think it will be, the conclusion is going to be the same. We're looking for a 25 basis point rate cut in September. So, that's sort of what's coming up. But when you don't hear from us next week, nothing went wrong. We just, quiet news week, and we're going to give Andrew and Alex an easy week and hopefully a fun holiday weekend. Those guys work really hard. They deserve it. So again, for everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you not next week, but in 2 weeks, we'll be back with, a new and improved five things for you.
Thanks, everyone.